Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're agriculture back from the break, and we're going to spend some time with Heavy Darby, Associate Professor, UVM Extension Service, and we're excited to hear what you have to tell us. Welcome.
Yeah,
The floor is
great,
yours.
thank you. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, I brought,
Just
Just
for
state your
protocol.
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm Heather Darby.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm a professor at the University of Vermont in Extension. I'm an agronomist and soil specialist. And this is gonna be my 23rd year like that. I know. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I brought a kind of sampling of some of the work that we do through my program at UVM Extension. So I'm the kind of faculty member there, and in my program, which we call the Northwest Crops and Soils Program, I have 14 grant-funded staff members that work with me on all kinds of topics. So we're really just trying to meet the needs of the agricultural community in the state of Vermont, and both through research, but also outreach and education. So the research that we're doing is on the ground, very applied, on farms across the state, but we also have a centralized location up in Alburg, Vermont, at the Rainville Farm that we've been doing research there for 15 years or so. And again, all applied research. We kind of take that information and put it into some of the publications you're seeing and get it out to the farming community. But again, our goal is whatever needs to be done, we're trying to do it. There's a lot of needs. Farming is becoming more diverse in Vermont. And so really trying to meet, the needs of dairy farmers and also the needs of all the other types of agriculture that are starting to grow and build in Vermont. You'll see we have a publication on producing hemp fiber, which we've been working on, malting barley, growing different kinds of grains in the state. We do work in vegetables as well. And then, of course, a big focus of our program is doing all of that while protecting the environment. So, really trying to keep, what we're doing profitable, economical, realistic for the farming community, while at the same time protecting and enhancing the natural resources around us. Over the last few years, if you're farming, the climate is always on your mind, but definitely over, the last, I would say, decade, it's just become a lot more erratic. And, of course, everybody's familiar with the last couple of years with the severe flooding and extreme, rainfall that we had. And so we've spent a lot of time just on the ground assisting producers. We've learned a lot. I don't want to say it was good that we learned it, but now we do, have these kind of experiences under our belt, and that certainly helps us. Unfortunately, if it happens again, we have a lot more information than we did, the first time around.
Can you take a minute and explain about how an idea would turn into a study?
Yeah. So as an example, there's increasing interest in precision agriculture in Vermont, which is really exciting. When I first started my job, it really seemed like something that wasn't scalable for Vermont, was really out of reach for people. The systems in place to have precision ag on farms.
Can you decide?
Yeah, so there's lots of types of precision ag. And what I'm talking about is kind of field-based precision ag, where we're using satellites and GPS to really kind of farm in fields, down to the plant, right? So currently still, most of what we manage is like a whole field, right? We look at a field, we take a soil test, we have a recommendation across the whole field. Maybe the field's 20 acres, maybe it's 50 acres. But now with precision ag, we can go out and get much finer. So now we're not looking at individual plants, although, you know, that's where things are headed. We're looking at zones in fields. So we're tracking yields using yield monitors. So as farmers are harvesting, precision ag collects yields as they're going through the field. So every so many feet, they're seeing it's this many tons or that many bushels. And so they can create a map of their whole field with the yields and understand what part of the field is really high producing, what part of the field might be low producing. And then you kind of start to dig into why. Can we get all the parts at optimum yields? Or if we can't, are we putting too much in to a low yielding part of the field? And we should add less fertilizer or do less work there because we're never going to get out of it what we're putting in. So and I will say the farmers are at the forefront of this, right? And so now as researchers, last year we brought a new technology to Vermont called variable rate fertilizer application, where farmers can go out, or we go out and we sample in those zones, soil sample. And then we make recommendations that are very fine across the whole field. So instead of saying 100 pounds of nitrogen, that's what the whole field gets. Now we're saying this part of the field gets 25 pounds, this part of the field gets 50 pounds, 100 pounds, based on soils, yields, soil type, drainage. You know, we can overlay all these things on a map. And then we purchased the spreader through funding through the Vermont Agency of Agriculture that can read those maps. And as the spreader is going through the field, reading the map, it's changing what it puts, you know, down on the ground. And, you know, it's really hopefully going to sort of revolutionize what we do and how much we need to put into fields. So our research is looking at, you know, implementation, like how do we collect the data? How do we take all that information and make something meaningful to the farmer? Then implement this variable rate fertilizer program and calculate if we're saving money, if we're putting on less fertilizer. And so we had 5 farms participate last year. And it was a little bit rocky trying to get, you know, for us to learn how to do everything. And so we're just kind of going through the process of looking at all the data to understand, did we optimize yield where we thought we would? Did we use less fertilizer? And then what do we need to do different this year? So that's the type of research that some of our research that we're focused on now. And it's called the precision, or the on-farm precision network. So we're trying to create a whole group or network of farms that will start to use this technology. The hard part is just more information, just like everything else today, more and more and more data. And we have to understand how to use it, how to put it together, and how to get it back to the farmer so they can use it. So that's one example.
Yes.
Well,
no, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So obviously, I would suspect that the farmers are receptive to this information.
Yeah.
How it's got to be complicated, and how are they adjusting? Because as you were saying in your testimony earlier, you're learning things on the fly. And it's kind of, so how are they adjusting to get the best out of their farm?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned, the farmers have been trying to implement precision ag for a while. And again, that can be in the barn, it can be in the field, it can be in a lot of different ways. This approach is a little bit new. So a lot of farmers already have these yield monitors, let's say, but then they can't really they don't really know how, or, how to utilize all of that information. And I think that is one of the primary challenges for people, is they're collecting a lot of information, but then really trying to use that, we haven't gotten there yet. So, and clearly not every farmer is doing this. It is expensive. It's an additional cost, additional management. It's all computers, so you have to have somebody that has that interest on the farm. The State Agency of Ag is really supportive of this, and they've been supporting farmers with grant funds to purchase different equipment and get these things going on their farm. One thing the state's been really supportive of is precision manure management, which is very similar to what I was talking about with fertilizer, where
you're about to do. I was gonna say, can you explain?
Yeah. So on their manure spreaders, it's again a computerized system that can change the rates of manure being applied across the field. So the same approach applies, but to change the rates, you need to know where, when, why you would do that, and that's kind of the piece that we're working on through UVM.
I get to remember your questions, okay? I don't mean to jump in on you guys, but Senator Heffernan and I were at an event Friday night, and the thing in Middlebury, and the thing that was most amazing to me was that they had young farmers up there. And I really expected these young farmers to say, yeah, I'm working on my father's farm and I'm raising a goat over here and I'm doing, no. So to your question, Senator Major, these young farmers get this.
Yeah.
They talked about things that just blew my mind. They were talking about scaling and about this and about that. And it was just amazing. It's not your father's farm anymore. It is a whole new way, and they get it. They really get what they want to do and how to get there. I was very impressed.
Yeah, we have a lot of, so it's not just big farms that are using this kind of technology. We have many small farms as well, 80 cow, 100 cow farms, with kind of a next generation on the farm that's really came out of college. We have a farm up in Berkshire in Franklin County. His son came out of Virginia Tech and is really into this. He actually was already trying to do this kind of zone mapping and fertilization, and we're just helping him get further, and fine tune it and use the data a little bit better. But yeah, the farmers are really on the cutting edge here, using collars on their cows to track all kinds of different processes with the animals. We have a number of small organic producers using that kind of technology, really helping them figure out if a cow is getting sick before they can even see it. And, that's important on all farms, but on organic farms where they don't have the same antibiotic tools, that's critical that they're able to see immediately if a cow changes her habits and able to address that. So it's a really exciting time in agriculture.
So without hesitation,
Yeah.
I will just say to the committee, whenever I see your name on our agenda, I'm very happy. Because I think you do just such a great job. I really do.
Thank you.
For again, the benefit of those that are sort of beginning, it's kind of like an auto mechanic that used to know a lot about points and plugs, and they could open a car's motor and look at it and figure out, and those days are gone. When you open a car's hood now, you have no idea, I don't think, unless you're an electronic wizard, what it is that and you got to take apart 50 other things to get to where you want to go. So this technology, I think, has helped the agricultural sector reduce the TMDL phosphorus levels and all that in many of the, especially Franklin and Chittenden County and Addison, to be fair. And so Heather helps farmers figure out, literally, as they're putting either a direct injection for fertilizer or manure, how much, and it's coming from the sky, and it's telling the machine how much to put down, and then it changes as they go to a different row in that field. It's an amazing thing to watch. I know also for a long time, and maybe still, Cornell used to be also kind of a mirror partner of yours in terms of taking a look at things like tile drainage
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
no-till, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so, we have a lot of collaborations, and actually, if you open this booklet, this is from our field day last year, you can see all the different funding sources and collaborators we have around the country. We're very active partners within other universities, across the country, including Cornell, of course, and Penn State, and, other institutions here in the Northeast. We get a lot more done when we can, look at things in different states, different environments. We do still have a lot of tile drainage work going on. We have a site up in St. Albans called Discovery Acres, and it's on a commercial farm in St. Albans Bay, which is on Jewett Brook, which is one of the most impaired watersheds in the state of Vermont. And the goal of that research site is to evaluate the impact of tile drainage and no tile drainage, and best management practices on water quality. And that was put into place. The first funding came from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. Our next funding has come from the Lake Champlain Basin Program to really try to understand, how can we manage tile to be able to minimize environmental impacts, but really put this practice into place to help farmers overcome today's climate. And, what we're finding is that we can manage tile, and we can put in best management practices and really increase yields, increase the value of cover crops as an example, and be protecting the water. So, all of this on the ground research is really critical for us to accomplish the goals that everybody wants here, which is ag and environment.
Thank you, Chair. So this is more for, and then I have a question that if you ever seen, most mowers now are GPS guided.
Yeah.
We watched a guy, he was mowing the field, actually stepped out of the cab to grab some air, and the thing was mowing itself. It's amazing the technology that, I understand that they can use it. My question on soil samples, has it got where, I remember the old days, you used to take a sample, mix this, that, and the other. Has it gotten quicker? Is it so that you can know your field better?
So there is some new technology coming to try to basically scan the soil and see if you can, kind of using algorithms basically to understand what the levels of nutrients are. We have strict regulations in the state of Vermont, and so, it's not a technology that we're using. It's not there yet, as far as the accuracy. We also have high organic matter soils in Vermont. We have manure and other organic matter application, which makes things a lot more complicated to use those kind of tools. What has gotten faster is, we now have units that are hooked up to ATVs or, side-by-sides to go out and do the sampling that also has GPS on it, so that we're, going to specific points in the field. We're taking more samples per field instead of that one, kind of lumping it together so that we can make those zones. Like this zone is high, this zone is low, etc.
So they don't have anything yet, like we see in Star Trek, where you put the soil in, it analyzes it.
They're working on it, but not quite there yet.
All right.
Yeah. We are, as I mentioned, working on a lot of, I don't want to say specialty crops, but specialty for Vermont. And so we're working with a lot of farmers on transitioning over to grain production. As farmers have left the dairy industry, that has been a direction that people have gone. They've started growing corn or soybeans, or other small grains like cereal rye. We look at cereal rye as a cover crop mostly, but cereal rye is great for making whiskey, great for making breads, and also with the increase in cover cropping, also seed to be supplied to other farmers for cover crop seed. So we've had a lot of initiatives and work to help farmers learn how to grow these crops, connecting them with different markets, whether it's a baker or a miller. I have a sample of corn in my truck right now that I need to drop off to Two Heroes Brewery in South Hero that I got from the Grembowitz farm down in Rutland, to be able to possibly use their grain corn to make a Mexican lager, and to make a whiskey. So just what's going to work best for Vermont grain growers is for that grain to stay local, and add value to it when possible. And really that circle is what we've been working on. We have a number of farms now that have received grants from the Working Lands program to start building grain infrastructure, bins, dryers, buying flour mills. The Jane Farm over in Waterford, the Northeast Kingdom, they have started NEK Grains. They bought a flour mill made locally in Vermont. If you don't know that, there's not very many American-made stone flour mills, and the highest quality ones are made right here in Vermont. You should visit. It's made out of berry granite.
Where's that?
It is New American Stone Mills. And they've been making mills. Those mills are all over the world now. They're very high quality. They're stone mills, so they don't make white flour, right? They make stone ground, whole wheat flour. And Andrew Hine is the owner of that company, Huyn, and his wife and himself started a bakery, Elmore Mountain Bakery. They're in Elmore. And you know, as they started, they had a mill they had bought, and they weren't satisfied with it, and he learned how to make his own stone mill, and then now they're all over the world. It's quite impressive. So now we have many of those in Vermont. They're all over New England, I think as far as Australia. So, you know, coming right out of here, out of Vermont, right out of the berry granite. So it's pretty
So got a lot of different crops coming and all, and what is there one specific crop that historically hasn't been in Vermont that's gonna take Vermont by storm?
No, I don't think so. You know, I think, as we know, diversity is the key for a lot of things, right? And diversity will be our key to, you know, long-term agricultural success. And, you know, we've always had a relatively diverse agriculture, but it's becoming more and more diverse, and really trying to keep those products local and support local food manufacturers, other dairy and livestock farms. You know, that's where people are finding success. Yeah.
Have you seen an uptick in like soybean? It seems like that
Yeah.
a lot of farmers, especially the larger farmers,
Yeah.
are doing it for.
Yeah. So we've seen a doubling in acreage over the last, 5 years or so, and that acreage keeps going up. You know, we were seeing a strong movement again towards looking at biofuels. I don't know where that's going to go, but especially from the jet fuel perspective. And when that happens, there's more and more demand for like soybean oil as an example. So, you know, the price of soybeans will go up. Grain prices right now are kind of have gone back down. When we were seeing a pretty strong exit of dairy, the grain prices were really high, and that helped a lot of people kind of make a next move. But, you know, some of those farms that are growing now soybeans, they're working with local dairies and trying to create a loop so that those soybeans stay in the state. And again, they add some value. You might want to talk to the Audettes at Blue Spruce. They've done a heck of a job really trying to build that local soybean market and basically feed into their dairy, working with other farms around them that have gone out of business. So, I think that's helping them. They've had a lot of learning curves, but that's the kind of, collaboration and community effort that we need to really keep agriculture, strong in our state.
Yes.
So I know your magnifying glass sort of takes a look at Northwest.
Mhm.
What about the eastern part of the state,
Yeah.
where the issue isn't as much phosphorus as it is nitrogen?
Yes. So the eastern part of the state, it's funny because when you go over there, everybody feels ignored if they're not on Lake Champlain. Sometimes I feel like they should be happy about that.
I was just gonna say, I'd be happy.
I think there's a lot of happiness. Yeah.
But yes, they have very, very different, issues over there where we see a lot of nitrogen leaching and not as much, sort of issues with phosphorus. They have some of the, especially along the Connecticut River, some of the best agricultural soils in the state. So really different challenges, but same practices apply for them, even though we talk a lot about precision agriculture to help, mitigate phosphorus buildup and losses, it's no different for nitrogen. And so those kind of same tools, technology, apply over there as well. Reducing tillage has become a huge effort in the state, and one that I never thought we would see, kind of like precision agriculture. When I started my job here, there were very, very few farmers that didn't till the ground. And when I say till, I mean they went out with their moldboard plows in the fall, and then more tillage in the spring, and then a little more tillage. We now refer to that as recreational tillage. And, there's a few people that still do that, but, largely that has sort of gone away. And more people now are not tilling at all, which is exciting and has been, a major emphasis of our work, trying to help people transition to that kind of system. And there's been so much success, and that's a practice that helps economics on a farm, and it helps the environment too. And so just naturally, those kind of practices that we can figure out get adopted pretty quickly, right? Because less fuel, less labor, just less time. Once people kind of get in that mode and they start to see the benefits, they don't ever want to go back, regardless of cost shares or government programs. Cover crops are integral to no-till in Vermont. And so it's also increased, the longevity of cover crops on farms, because they know that's an important piece of success with no-till. And now with the flooding and the severe wet weather, soils have become compacted. And when you're not tilling, there's not a lot of ways to alleviate that compaction. And so the farmers they're beside themselves because they've invested so much in no-till. They're worried about the earthworms or worried about the health of their soil. And the last thing they want to do is go back out and till it up.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to figure out ways to alleviate compaction without having to go back out there with a moldboard plow. But we have to figure it out because crop yields are going down. You can see it in the fields. There's a lot of concern around it. And, we have a bunch of projects where we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this? Now we're calling it strategic tillage instead of recreational, where we're finding, again, the zones where we know there's severe compaction, trying to use very light and directed tillage to alleviate that, and then monitoring what happens. What are the farmers losing for doing that strategic implementation? So,
Phosphates,
Yeah.
I spoke with a farmer the other night, and he says that it's not necessarily, the cows that are creating that it's actually, for lack of a better word, legacy, or it's in the soil. Like it's coming off the mountains and that it's in the soil. And so we're looking to push down into the lake, but if it's coming not from the cows, but the land itself, and that is my main question, is it in the ground, and what created it to be in the ground?
Yeah, so, it's complicated. We, in many parts of Vermont, not in the Champlain Valley, we start to get up into the hills of Vermont, we have very, very high aluminum soils. And that's what makes the soils acidic, right? And so people know that Vermont's a place where you line your fields. And back in the old days, you lined all the time, especially when you were up in those hills. If you're down in the Champlain Valley where it was old sea bottom, right, you can think about the shells and the, crustaceans. We have pretty high pHs here. So we don't generally have to lime at all. But once you kind of move out of this area, the pHs go down and the aluminum levels go way up. And that's what creates the acidity. So aluminum is a really, really strong binding agent to phosphorus. So back in the old days, people would add, and they'd have to add a lot of phosphorus to be able to get enough to feed their crop. Because within days, literally by 5 days, whatever you had put in that soil, it is like sucked up by the aluminum and bound to that aluminum. So if your crop doesn't get it in that 5 days, it's gone. So to try to overcome that, people would add more, like 4 times as much as what they would need. That was really, really common. Well, so what that did over time, obviously, is, build up the levels of phosphorus. And so it didn't necessarily, come out of anywhere. We've been adding phosphorus for a really long time for very good reason. Like that is very well known. And honestly, if you go up into those areas today, it's still very much the situation for the majority of the farms. They are deficient in phosphorus. Where we find fields that are not deficient are generally the ones behind the fields behind the barn, right? That have been, they were like the night pasture, or that's where grandpa stacked his manure pile during the winter, or that was the only place you could get to spread manure most of the year, And so those fields tend to be excessive in phosphorus. And you can actually go to a field where there is no farm anymore, but there used to be, and those fields will still be excessive. So it takes time to build those levels up, but it also takes a really long time for those levels to go down. Phosphorus isn't like nitrogen. It's not like potassium. It doesn't leach. It can if the soils become way too saturated, which is pretty rare. We do have some of those fields in Vermont, but again, it's very rare. So because it doesn't leach, it also means that it builds up over time. And where we have concentrated areas of dairy with really long-term manure application, even at feasible rates, it's going to build up over time. And that's kind of where we're at, right? And so what's happened at this point is that we realized that the soils are building up. And when you have a lot of erosion and there's phosphorus stuck to that soil, then it moves off the field. And once I think everybody realized that we had a lot of erosion in Vermont, okay, that I'm not saying we don't have erosion, but we have worked to address that in highly significant ways over the last 2 decades. But, you know, that's how phosphorus moves from the field.
Plant life doesn't eat that up after
It does,
a amount of time?
but not enough, right? Like, once you kind of build it up in soils, you're removing some in the plants when you're harvesting crops, but not enough, you know? And so to draw down those levels, it just it would take a really long time.
What plant likes phosphorus the best? But phosphorus is mainly for the root structure of a
Well,
plant.
yeah, agriculturally, it's corn.
Mm.
Agriculturally, it's like sorghum, you know, those crops, high biomass crops, where you're removing lots of tonnage, are gonna remove the most phosphorus, but still, you know, you're not talking a lot. You know, but so if the soils are loaded already, then it's managing them so you don't increase it anymore. And that's what we do with nutrient management plans. And it's managing around the field and in the field so the soil doesn't leave the farm. And that's how, you know, we gotta keep the soil in the fields. And people are doing a great job with that, right? We have mandated buffers along all fields in the state of Vermont, along ditches in the state of Vermont even. We have, you know, cover cropping going on, no-till, all of those things to keep the soil in place.
So the phosphorus will never leave then. We can't plant enough corn to dilute, you know,
Well, in the fields that have excessively high, which again is pretty rare,
okay.
right? So first of all, the majority of fields in Vermont need phosphorus. I will say that. You know, where you have concentrated dairy farms for century,
Mhm.
that's where you start to see fields, right? Individual fields usually that have become not saturated, but high in phosphorus. So now we're managing those so they don't get any higher. We have a drawdown plan so that over time it'll go down and that we don't have any transport off the field. So those are state regulations. We teach classes to farmers. We're teaching one right now. Farmers come to class. They learn how to manage nutrients, phosphorus. You know, if they're in the Connecticut River, it's nitrogen. And they make a plan for the farm and they put it into place. So it's, you know, most of the world is deficient in phosphorus. So, you know, I think we're lucky to have it actually, and we just need to manage it.
But the direct evidence of too much is the cyanobacteria that all of a sudden appears in the St. Albans Bay, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, so you were talking about legacy phosphorus, and that is an issue. There is, you know, once you know that you have a problem and you know what's causing it, then it's our job to try to fix it, which is what we've been trying to do. But that doesn't change what happened before that. And so that is a problem that some of the water bodies, the sediment in the water bodies have that legacy phosphorus in it. So, you know, that is an issue that is, you know, you sort of, even if you put a barrier around all of land, not just agricultural land, like all land has phosphorus in it, right? And there's a lot of erosion lately with all these flooding that's not coming from farming. But, you know, you have all that legacy phosphorus there, and that keeps releasing. And it's the same thing, you know, it takes time for it to come out.
So it releases in the water.
Yes. Yep.
What kind of techniques are there because it is underwater, it's harder to directly interact with it.
Yeah.
Do you dredge? Do you pull
There's
some?
been some, some water not courses, but like bodies, maybe very small lakes or ponds. You know, there's been talk of lining them. Remember I talked about aluminum being a strong binder to phosphorus, lining them with a product called alum, which is an aluminum product to kind of bind that legacy phosphorus. I don't know if it's been done in Vermont. It's been talked about. It's not very appropriate for most places because you kind of have to stop what, you know, you have to have a very defined area to be able to do that. But, you know, some of those things have come up to try to, get rid of or block some of that, legacy
Legacy,
phosphorus, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it hasn't been easy with all the flooding either, as you can imagine. There's a lot of soil moving, very difficult.
I have a, great farmer friend, actually, his son's a representative here, he's 82 years old, and you were talking about Cornell earlier. And his grandson went to Cornell,
Yeah.
he's very, very proud of his grandson. But he has a funny line that says, you can tell a young man that's been to Cornell, but you can't tell him much. And, yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I've heard that one.
Yeah.
You know, a big part of our work right now is working on this sort of transitioning away from neonics. With the bill passed last year that would ban neonicotinoid usage. So, you know, we started the work a few years earlier, mostly with the goal of, you know, trying to understand how to manage it better, what's actually happening. And then the law was passed, so now it's really focused on transitioning away from those seed treatments, and trying to figure out risk on farms. You know, farms are very, very concerned about pest damage once they stop using neonicotinoid seed treatment. So we've now, over the last couple of years, really had a strong focus on that. We're working directly with Cornell because they had passed the same, you know, the same bill. So we're trying to align our work with them so that, you know, we're all on the same page, collecting the same data, combining the data so that we can have more, you know, more points to be able to figure out when is a farmer really at significant risk of loss. So it's in its early stages, but, you know, we're plugging away at it.
What studies have you done on neonics to say, are they as bad as what they were portrayed as?
Well, I think there's been studies, there was a period of time, I think 2013, 14, 15, where there were a lot of honeybee kills in like Ohio, Indiana, places like that. That really elevated the concern around those pesticides, and then it sort of, you know, definitely grew from there. I can't speak to bee damage in the state of Vermont in relation to neonics. I don't know if we saw the same thing at that time, but there was sort of this period of time where this raised highly because there was a lot of reported beehive death. I don't know if it was in Vermont, but I do know it was elsewhere. So there was a lot of effort put into understanding how can this pesticide on a seed that's going into the ground be harming bees that are not in the ground, right? Like, how's it getting to them? And, you know, they had a consortium called the Corn Dust Consortium, where they were looking at planting and, you know, how are the neonics coming off the field, et cetera. There was a lot of work done for a number of years, and there really hasn't been any work done since kind of COVID hit, I think, and that was kind of almost the end of the conversation. It picked back up here in the eastern part of the United States. A lot of concern around, you know, pollinators and reduced level of pollinators and difficulties with bees. So what we have been looking at is, you know, the dust coming out of planters, trying to understand that. What we were told by the researchers in Ohio in particular was they hadn't seen bee deaths like they did at that time. So their assumption was that the seed companies had improved the coatings, meaning improved how well they were stuck on the seed. So we started to investigate that last year to see, like, well, are they on the seed better? And so we just have 1 year of data on that. And it seems that it depends. It depends on the seed company. But it does come off. And depending on they use these things called fluency agents that they put in with the corn to help the corn flow better through the planter. And those can be really abrasive. It's graphite, so that graphite kind of, as seeds kind of moving around in the planter, it's taking the coating off, and then that can come up in the planter's exhaust. And so we've looked at other fluency agents to see if there are any that suppress that, and there seems like there's one in particular that does a really, really good job. It seems like the coating, how well it's stuck on, really depends on the company. So, to me, it actually is very positive because it seemed like we had some opportunities to significantly reduce the risk. And so we're going to continue to look at those, but it does come off. It's coming off a runoff. It's coming out of tile lines. We do know that. We've measured it. That is what we're trying to get a handle on. It lasts in the soil, especially when it's used repeatedly. When we use it in 1 year, it looks like it degrades to the point where we don't pick it up anymore. But if you're constantly using it, it seems like it will reside in the soil. So it's banned. So now really it is about how do we manage these pests, and when will we see crop losses, and what are we going to do? So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would say, in answer to your question, Senator, I think there was mixed testimony on the effect that it had on pollinators. I'll just leave it at that. It certainly wasn't 100 to nothing in either direction. But I'm wondering, one of the concerns, maybe the main concern from farmers in Vermont, and I assume New York, was whether seed manufacturers would actually be able to sort of turn things around and provide non-treated seeds to the point where, I mean, most of the country uses treated seed. There's no way around that, especially, planting corn. So it would cost the manufacturers, kind of like making cars on an assembly line. They have to shut it down and do something else to take the coating off. And I don't know if there's any indications yet as to whether the manufacturers have said, even though Vermont and New York are a minuscule part of what we produce, we have to do something.
Yeah, so
In Quebec too, right?
Yeah, you got a different, I think, just from what I learned last year and the year before, the land types up there are different. And so, and Quebec does not use treated seed as well.
yeah, they do not use neonicotinoid treated seed, but they do use other seed treatments. The seed treatment that's been talked about the most as an alternative is diamides. And diamides are what we've seen in our studies, and Cornell has seen too. They're effective. Right now, we've seen that they're as effective as a neonicotinoid. They are less broad spectrum, so that's certainly a benefit. They're more expensive to produce, which is probably why they haven't been used as much in the past, which means, the cost will be more. There are a couple of companies that already offer diamide treated seed if you want it. And, I imagine that's probably what will happen. That's where people will head. They're widely available.
Just more costly.
A lot. From what I understand, they're more costly. I don't know how it would change, what the inconvenience factor would be, as far as like inventory management from a seed company's perspective. I'm sure it gets more complicated if you can't treat everything with one product. But yeah, they're widely available. They seem to be as effective from what we can tell so far, but they'll be more costly. So that's my assumption. Might be a big assumption, but I'm assuming that's where we're going to head next.
Well,
No.
we have till 29. so-
Yeah, knowing the risk would be good. It's hard to know the risk when we've been using them for so long. Yeah. But the pests are out there always.
Yeah.
But when do they cause damage is what we're trying to figure out. I can pick them up, March, April. But knowing when they're gonna cause catastrophic loss is what we're trying to figure out. Yeah. What we did figure out was, manure and tillage increase the probability of damage.
Yeah.
So going away from tillage is good, but we still have manure, so. Spring applied,
Lots of,
yeah, yes, absolutely. Great. Just a word on hemp. I mean, we haven't quite had the buzz we did a few years ago, but our team is working on fiber hemp, which has been really exciting, and working with a partner in New York, Battenkill Fiber Mills, and been growing up hemp, and currently we'll be turning it into yarn. So pretty exciting on that. And there were a couple of businesses around that were trying to get up and started. The infrastructure is quite expensive, but we have the small scale infrastructure for the research to be able to basically take the hemp and turn it into a material that can go to a fiber mill. So we're pretty excited to see where we can go. We're working with a local clothing manufacturer that we're hoping what we get out of, excuse me, of the 100-day cough. That we get out of the fiber mill, we're hoping to send it there and see if we can get a sweater made with it. We've been combining it with wool, and there's a very strong interest from the sheep producers to see how efforts could be combined there. Yeah. So,
I know when they're doing hemp to do the not the cannabis, but the,
Yeah.
is it CBD? Yeah, is it easier to process it for making this product? Or is it still labor intensive?
it's not labor intensive, but it's equipment that we don't have. And so you would grow, you can see, looks like a jungle there. Basically, you plant the hemp with a normal grain drill, like you would winter rye. It grows quite high. I mean, depending on the year, it can be 14 feet tall.
Wow.
You go through, you mow it with like a sickle bar mower, basically kind of works the best. You leave it in the field to slightly rot, and that separates the outside of the plant, the fiber part, the bast fiber, from the inside core. And then it gets, at that point, it would probably get baled up commercially, and then it has to be broke. You got to remove the inside core. And then those long fibers that are used to make like linen and high quality products have to be combed, very similar to like wool, and then, brought to some kind of fiber mill. So all possible for sure. And I think, in Pennsylvania, there's a big movement right now. There's been investment in equipment. People are looking at also growing flax. And some of the other bast fiber crops in combination with hemp fiber, to see where we can go with this. So very, I would say, experimental at this point, but pretty exciting.
That certainly is a crop that boomed there for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, then it was too much.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I left you plenty of material to look at.
For sure.
We have, this is from our field day. We have a big field day in July, usually up at the research facility. It's a great day. We get a lot of, usually we have our federal delegation that comes, Anson comes. We get a couple hundred people from all over the region. A lot of Canadians come. It's a great day. They get to see all the research, learn about lots of different topics, agriculturally. So I just brought you the proceedings from that, which there's a lot there. And then this is the research results. And, we're doing about 55 to 60 unique research trials every year. And need some late night reading.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you
As
for having
advertised, It
me.
was fantastic.
Yeah, happy to come
Appreciate
back at any time, and please reach out if you
And
need
we
any
will.
contacts or more information.
And this was more just information for us. Do they ask for any money from us or?
Yeah, I can't, that's not my,
I'm sure there's a piece in the agricultural budget, or we can have Anson come in and talk about that.
I'm just an educator.
And a good one at that.
And a good one.
A good one at that. We appreciate you very much.
I'm leaving, but just, there's, the organic milk market is booming right
Yeah.
now quite
Yeah.
significantly. The organic grass only market is pretty hot still. Our team has been doing research on that since 2016. So if you want to know about cost of production for producing grass only milk, challenges, opportunities, there's a big
Great.
compilation of information there, so.
Thanks, Heather.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
everybody.
Thanks for
Yeah.
coming
All right,
in.
thank you.
Drive safe.
Glad you made it in safely.
No. You too. Well, good luck.
Thank you.